The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When he disembarked and saw the crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Please be seated. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
We've heard relentlessly from preachers, sociologists, and psychologists that humans are social animals, that we are meant to live in communities, that aloneness is pathological. People who have been single for many years, past the usual age for marriage, are often viewed as oddities by well-meaning relatives and friends, urging them to find a mate. But aloneness, in and of itself, is sometimes a necessary part of being human, particularly if one is in a leadership position, such as a manager or supervisor in a place of employment, a public official, or pastor of a church. Leadership positions are inherently social, requiring ongoing interaction with others. Leaders are in the business of meeting the expectations of others. Living day in and day out and dealing with people is not easy. If you're in that kind of position, you need to take an occasional time out so that you can continue to be effective. Jesus, just as human as we are, knew that leaders needed to take time out to rest and recoup. The storyline in Mark leading up to the gospel today had Jesus sending out his disciples on a mission, and then hearing about the murder of John the Baptist, and as you know, that was a rather gruesome story, featuring the presentation of his head on a silver platter at the request of one of King Herod's mad relatives. So under all those circumstances, Jesus and his disciples understandably needed to take time off. And that's exactly what they did, as Jesus told them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." Off they went in their boat without even a chance to eat. But their rest time was short-lived. When people saw them leaving, huge crowds besieged Jesus for the wisdom and healing that only he could provide. So eager were they for Jesus that they got to the place where he had planned to speak before he did. They saw Jesus as a leader. What exactly is a leader? A leader is not a manager. Warren Bennis, a business school professor, defined the difference between a leader and a manager, and he said, managers are people who do things right, while leaders are people who do the right things. A good leader is a shepherd. What is a shepherd? People seek leaders who are shepherds. A shepherd understands the needs of the sheep. A shepherd will empathize with their concerns, protect them, and show them the way. A shepherd comforts sheep when they are hurt or fearful. A shepherd leads sheep to fresh pastures and water. A shepherd searches out sheep when they stray. A shepherd rejoices in the success and prosperity of the flock. And a shepherd will sacrifice the shepherd's own life for the sheep. Jesus was all of that and more. In today's gospel, We hear that the people seeking to hear Jesus and receive his ministry were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus saw their need and fulfilled it better than they ever expected. The role of a leader in any organization is to effectuate a set of values, to inspire those whom he or she leads. Our political leaders often inspire others with their passion for a cause. A good example is Senator Bernie Sanders, who is taking up the cause of the 99% against the 1%. An explorer leads by cutting a path through a jungle for others to follow. And a corporate executive leads by developing a strategy for a business to succeed. In his leadership, Jesus was all of that. He was certainly passionate on behalf of the poor and the oppressed, so passionate that he was willing to go to the cross to maintain his own integrity, rather than disengage from his ministry to save his own skin from the Sanhedrin and the Roman Empire. And his life cut a path where no one had gone previously, advocating love in place of retaliation. And yes, Jesus had a strategy to beat his competition, that is, Satan. Jesus overcame the evil one by rising from the dead and reigning in everlasting victory, trampling down death by death to establish the kingdom of God. The ongoing strategic plan of Jesus, however, is still with us. It is called the church, of which we are a part by our baptism, and which continues in its purest form by the constant celebration of the Mass, like we hear today as God's people. Jesus outlined his strategy when he entrusted the church to his disciples, giving us the Eucharist for the continued celebration of his life, death, resurrection, and ascension as the events heralding the triumph of Jesus over evil, wherein Jesus inspired us with his vision of God's kingdom. Do you recall all those descriptions of the kingdom of heaven in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke? Jesus told those stories to share his vision with humanity. Not every leader, however, is as successful as Jesus. Today's Old Testament lesson is about shepherds who failed miserably. The role of a shepherd is not just to drive the sheep from place to place so they get enough to eat. In Old Testament times, kings of nations were likened to shepherds, not only ruling the people, but keeping them safe from enemies. In today's reading, Jeremiah was describing the kings of Israel, in particular the last four, who were Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. They were bad shepherds who misled and abused the people in their care, scattering and exploiting them, instead of leading them together as a nation and defending them from the invasions by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, which resulted in exile from the Promised Land for about 70 years. But God was determined to see a new regime with new shepherds to establish God's reign on earth, gathering the remnant of God's people from those returning from the Babylonian exile, under shepherds who will care for and protect them. And most important, none shall be lost. Here we see the inclusiveness of God manifesting itself several hundred years before Jesus came on the scene. But Jeremiah thinks that God had Jesus in mind, as he tells us that a new king, a new shepherd, descended from the great King David, will be established, who will do what is just and allow God's people to live in security in the land of Israel. As you'll recall, the Gospels of Matthew and Luke trace the genealogy of Jesus back to King David. As the ministry of Jesus unfolds in the Gospels, we see what good shepherding, that is, good leadership, looks like. When one is in a leadership position, it's important to keep one's ear to the ground, to know what the people one is leading are thinking and feeling. As a leader, one cannot live in one's own little world and not pay attention to what's happening on the ground among the people one leads. Leaders just can't do what they want to do. They have to respond to their constituencies, or they end up without a constituency. For example, the owner of a business has to meet the needs of its customers while simultaneously responding to the agendas of employees, lenders, suppliers, and government agencies. Politicians have to respond to the desires of their constituents lest they be defeated at the polls. A good leader is a servant, not a dominator. Jesus exemplified that. In the Epistle to the Philippians, St. Paul tells us that Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. Recall that he was among us as one who serves, and that he washed the feet of his disciples at the Last Supper. The leader intent on domination is the kind who scatters the sheep and drives them away. That kind of leader gets compliance only by fear. People obey, fearing loss of their livelihood, leading to poverty. Workers who comply with demands of an authoritarian boss because they fear losing their job don't work because they want to achieve something. Rather, they are focused on mere survival instead of the feeling of satisfaction from doing a job well. A business that runs on that kind of atmosphere deserves to fail. Note that in his role as a shepherd and leader, Jesus was not the command and control type. He led by inspiring people, not controlling them. When one tries to control people, they rebel. Note how people who live in countries with repressive regimes respond in one of two ways. Either they leave or they start a revolution. It's the old flight or fight. People tolerate oppression only for so long. By contrast, people wanted to be with Jesus because Jesus was there to serve them with a ministry of healing, teaching, and confronting the oppressive power structure that characterized the status quo of his day. Jesus shows us that a leader who serves is a leader who gathers. People gather around a leader who meets their needs. Just like in the business world, people are more likely to do a good job at work for a nice boss than for a tyrant. Jesus proved that one cannot be an effective leader unless one respects the dignity of those one leads. Jesus did that, but the church has not always done that. Historically, the church has likened the laity to animal-type sheep and has treated them like animal-type sheep, expecting them to pray, pay, and obey. That is demeaning. And some church leaders have abused those who they led, such as the abuse of children that we've received so much publicity over the last 20 years. Not only is the abuse in and of itself wrong, but its effect is the opposite of evangelization. Nearly all the victims of abusive conduct have turned away from whatever institutional church where that conduct occurred, be it Roman or otherwise. Many have left religion altogether. In the words from today's lesson to Jeremiah, they have become sheep who were scattered and driven away. In the words of Jesus in today's gospel, they are now sheep without a shepherd. When we encounter those people in our travels, we can talk to them about how Jesus gathers and cares for people, but in most instances, that won't be enough to get them to Mass. Yet, we can't ever cease to talk about the love of Jesus, exemplified by his death on the cross. Jesus draws us to himself by bringing peace. On the cross, he reconciled us to God by putting the interests of humanity ahead of his own human survival instinct. To give a concrete contemporary example of how that looks and feels, consider business owners who accept a lower standard of living for themselves so that their employees can earn a living wage and have health insurance. What kind of message is that to their employees? The message is that they work for someone who cares about them as people, a shepherd that truly cares about the sheep. Unfortunately, such owners are few, and as so many business owners are taken in by and endlessly chase the so-called American dream to maximize personal luxury, which at the end of the day is supremely empty and meaningless, proving the emptiness of human joy. You don't have to be Christian to learn leadership lessons from Jesus, who is the shepherd prophesied by Jeremiah, who will bring freedom from fear by preaching peace and establishing God's justice. Despite being executed as a criminal, Jesus managed to inspire an organization that now has more than 2 billion people and has lasted almost 2,000 years. If nothing else, those numbers prove Jesus knew how to gather people into a community better than any other leader in human history. He continues to be the greatest of shepherds, with the largest herd. Clearly, Jesus knew a thing or two about leadership. Amen. Let's stand for the creed found on page 8. I believe in God.